Hi, I'm Joey Only, the Caribou Weather Dude and Forest Fire Crew Boss, talking to you about weather and the fire environment. In last video, I talked about temperature and maybe gave some insight as to why BC might have a bit of a down fire season with La Nina in the works. Cooler temperatures and damper temperatures should mean for less fire activity in BC this year. Now, we also talked about yesterday in the temperature section quickly about the fire triangle, how you need heat, fuel, and oxygen to make fire. Now, we know what would happen if that fuel was wet. What's going to happen if the air itself is wet? Ooh. So the question is, how much water in a gaseous state can the air hold? Warm air can hold more, cold air can hold less. No moisture, relative humidity 0. Full saturation, relative humidity 100%. How much moisture the air can hold varies with temperature, right? So minus 40 pretty much holds no moisture. It's not allowed to hold moisture. Everything turns to ice quickly. So that's why you see contrails turn to ice sometimes up in the sky. If the temperature is 30 degrees, well, that air can hold more moisture, right? And that's what thunderstorms are capable of doing when very hot weather comes. They can hold a lot of moisture in just one cloud. A common firefighting tactic is to mist the air and make the air more humid. And how much moisture is in the air will actually affect the fire behavior. If you have a year where we have a lot of consistently 60, 70, 80% humidex values throughout the day on average, you're going to have a season with lower burning. If you have a season where you get down to below 30%, we talked about crossover in the last video, 30 degrees Celsius, if the temperature goes up above that, if the relative humidity goes below 30%, right? Suddenly you have crossover conditions. Add some wind at 30 kilometers an hour, you have the most explosive fire conditions. That's what crossover is. So that humidity is very important. It doesn't matter how dry the fuel is, if the air is 100% humid, it's gonna really creep and crawl as it burns. And you've tried to light fires in damp situations, even with dry wood, and you found the fire didn't just take off, did it? You're camping on the West Coast, it's foggy in the morning, you can't seem to get your fire to go for anything. Now you know why that is. The air is too humid. So then think about your fine fuels in the forest floor, all your little needles and sticks and things like that. Now say that they are at 50% saturation. They're very wet right now, those fine fuels, right? But the air is very dry. It's below that 30% humidex value we were talking about. It's very dry. Well, it's going to eat the moisture out of everything it comes into contact with, basically, right? So that affects the drying conditions in the forest floor. If the wood is, only 5% saturation and the air is at 0, it's going to continue to suck moisture out of that wood. And this is going to lead to fine fuels being more flammable, more ready to burn. The tendency is for these things to equalize over time, and that's what they're trying to do. When a thunderstorm is trying to grow up, it will drink from every available source of moisture in nature, from lakes, from trees, from the forest floor, from little twigs, from you as you dry out. So this affects fire activity. It affects the behavior, the nature of the fire itself, the actual moisture content in the air. So relative humidity has a daily variation. You've seen this often. When's it the most humid? Well, first thing in the morning is often a good time for it. You'll wake up, you'll see fog on the lakes and in the trees and things like that. Your best time of day for it, and through the late parts of the night. When is it going to be the driest? Well, as that sun heats the landscape throughout the day, it's going to induce drying. So lower humidity, often after 3 p.m. in the afternoon, is an especially dry time of day. This is also why thunderstorms like to form between 3 p.m. and say 7 p.m. at night, more often than not. So at the driest hours of the day is when you have thunderstorm activity. Well, if that thunderstorm is reaching outside of its rain core, it's raining here, but the lightning's shooting over there and over here and over here and over here, those dry places may be places that fire starts are very likely to happen. Humidity has a seasonal variation as well, right? In the winter months, if it's hovering around 0, 5, 10, like it's often damp in the air, and the fall is often a very damp time here in Wells. Spring can be damp here in Wells at night. You've had snow melting all day and some evaporation happening, and then when the nightfall settles, the cold comes in and like, oh, it's so damp and miserable. So I mean, it just depends on where you are and what time of year it is as to what that relative humidity is going to look like. Of course, you know that July and especially August are the driest months in BC, and you know that June is often and most typically the wettest month. And with altitude, depending where you are in the mountain, right, depending on the aspect, if you're facing the south, you have a lot more sunshine drawing that aspect. And you know this, if you go on the north side of the mountain right now, you're going to find a lot of snow here in Wells because the sun's not high enough to get down on that. So it's very humid in the north slopes right now. Also, how much forest cover is there? If there's no forest cover, you're going to have a localized area being a lot drier. If there's a lot of forest cover, a localized area might be much wetter. And we know this transevaporation, right? How does the moisture move across the province by using the trees? And we also know that because of fires and logging and the loss of old growth, we have affected how moisture moves through the province, right? So trees themselves are a giver of relative humidity. We also know that relative humidity is affected by altitude. So up here in the mountains, the relative humidity is a lot different than it is in the drier areas, say in Quesnel and Williams Lake or Kamloops. The relative humidity is quite low in those valley bottoms. You go into Cache Creek and you see it's all sagebrush land, but you look up on the very top of the hills and there's trees up there, right? Because that moisture's been moving through. The clouds are up there often. You know, that's where the trees are going to live because of where the relative humidity is. It's better climate for them to exist in.
Is it really always hotter and drier down in the valley bottom?
The exception, though, at times is what they call thermal inversions. And this is when warm air, we know warm air rises, warm air in the valley bottom will start crawling its way up to the top of the hills, and you will find at times, say even the evenings especially, I found this in Wells where at 8 o'clock at night the sun was about an hour from going down in the summer and it got very cool in the valley. And I was like, ugh. And then we got in the quads and drove up to the top of Groundhog. We got up there and it was like 15 degrees and it was lovely. Well, this can affect fire behavior, right? You can expect that sometimes those inversions are going to make for increased burning activity. Fire behavior will be more conducive because of the fact that it's warmer and it's drier at that altitude at that time. In the wintertime, we see this here in Wells. You know, it's kind of funny because we get the best of both worlds sometimes. It's known that it's a winter climate here, but when it was minus 42 in Quesnel, it was minus 35 in Wells. When it was plus 50 in Lytton, it was only plus 37 here in Wells. So that's what living at 4,000 feet, the variation it can give. So that's all for today's episode. Tomorrow, or when I make the next video, I should say, we'll talk about wind speed and how wind speed affects fire behavior. Please subscribe to this channel. Support me on Patreon. I could really use the help. Or leave a tip on the channel here below. I could really use the help right now. Fire season, I think, is going to be a dead one this year. And because of that, I'm making videos, but it also means I'm probably losing out in tens of thousands of dollars. So there's always two sides of the coin for firefighters. We want to be at work because warriors like to fight. That's what we do. But we're all happy to see that this season is not looking explosive. At least it will take some time before things dry out in the province. That's all for today. But I guess we'll see you next time. Bye now. That is over the top. I think that's forest fire. Could be true. Holy son of a bitch.